Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to the channel here today. So going down this weekend, UFC Baku, Fiziev versus Torres. And honestly, man, we got a very stacked card here. We got a lot of bangers on this fight. We got a lot of, one-sided fights. But, overall, this card, I would rate it to a 9.5. We've had some, good um, UFC Fight Night cards recently. Last week, Michal versus Horiguchi was definitely a banger. But, looking at it here, we got the main event, Fiziev versus Torres, which, is a good main event. Not, I wouldn't say the worst main event, not the best main event, but definitely an interesting main event. Co-main event, Michel Pereira, Char Bullet, definitely a fight I'll be looking forward into. You got Nazim Sarnikov versus Matuiz, Camilio. It's going to be a banger as well. Ashul Bobby versus Charles Johnson. I think it's going to be a good one. Should be a good one too. Bruno Ferreira versus Ikram. Alex Saba is going to be a good one. Abu Samagada, Michel, Oleksiejczuk, this entire card in general. Eric Nolan making his return. Yeah, this is a good card overall. Rated a total of a 9.5 out of 10. Definitely going to be a very stacked card from top to bottom. But before we get any further into the video, if you guys are entertained with my type of UFC content, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on notifications when you guys want to see me upload, and let's get into these predictions. Up first, we have here is Tahir Abdullayev versus Jefferson Nascimento. My apology if I said Tahir's name wrong. So, from what I've seen from this fight, obviously I feel like at first I was going to side with Nascimento. The more I've seen from Tahir, the more I think this is a 50-50 fight. Jefferson Nascimento, man. Looking at his last five fights, in the LFA, beating Matuiz, Racha, beating Italo Gomez, beating Gabriel Costa, beating Berggren Yakhyaev, beating Glenn Mercedes. So I felt like this was Jefferson Nascimento was definitely hyping the LFA more. This is honestly a very good fighter. He is a underrated striker. He has good grappling, but against Tahir, man, he lost to Magomedov, who was undefeated. Then went on this very impressive run. The majority of these ones, he won this one by ground and pound, but then he had some impressive submissions here. Like these two submissions right here are very underrated. I don't think you get. I think this choke is banned, but definitely the Von Flue choke, I don't think that's banned. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a tough task for both fighters. Honestly, I feel like Jefferson Nascimento, because listen, Tahir is a very explosive guy. He throws it. He kind of He throws a good amount of combinations. He affects you through all fights. It's kind of tough for you to beat him. I'm so, he and just looking at this fight. It's gonna looking at this fight. Jefferson Nascimento's he could definitely lose his O in this fight. Tahir Abdullayev has very good boxing, very good kickboxing, is a good Muay Thai fighter. Jefferson Nascimento's, I would definitely say for Jefferson Nascimento's has the better, is probably, better striking. But Tahir, has such good fight IQ, and this could definitely be a good easy night for Tahir. Jefferson Nascimentos, I feel like he would have to target the body early. He has some significant body work. He definitely moves around. These guys both move around pretty fast. It's going to be a very fast pace, especially versus two welterweights. It's going to be a very good fight. I think Jefferson Nascimento is going to look faster. I know it's the first time at 155, but I think he's definitely going to look a little faster in this fight. And I'm going to side with Jefferson Nascimentos to win a decision over Tahir Abdullayev. It's going to be a fun fight overnight. I think on the ground, I would definitely favor Tahir. On the feet, it's definitely close on the feet. But give me Jefferson Nascimentos to win this one by a decision. Next up, in the bantamweight division, we got him here is Bekzat Almakhan versus John Matsumoto. Now, this fight is a close fight. Now we're gonna take a look at these last fights. John getting into the UFC, beating Dan Aguida, beating Brad Canono, which is a solid win. Brad Canono definitely has some good striking. I feel like he's very chinny. But then took his first loss to Rob Font on short notice. Even though I get it, Rob Font hasn't won a fight ever since he beat John Nascimentos. But John Nascimentos didn't do terrible throughout this fight as well. Then beat Miles Jones, which Miles Jones, that's a good win too. Miles Jones is good on the feet. And losing a Farad Basharat, even though I'm starting to think at this point Farad Basharat's a little bit overrated, and I do think that John I think that John Matsumoto did win this fight. But then, we look at Berggzat. On the original scene, man, he was looking very good. Being Matuas, Gorana, and Jan Frazel by some very impressive win. Getting into the UFC, losing to Umar Nurmagomedov, who at the time was undefeated. And honestly, man, that's not a bad loss. Throughout that fight, I think he was definitely giving him trouble with that boxing. He has good. Berggzat definitely has good calf kicks. Then, did get his first win by beating Brad Canono, which I know, like I said, Brad Canono's a decent win. They lose on Alexandre Topuria. Listen, his two losses in the UFC are Umar Nurmagomedov and Alexandre Topuria. And those are the two best bantamweights in the world. I know, on record, Topuria is unranked, but if we look in general, in my opinion, he's got to be one of the best bantamweights in the world. Even though that he's not in the top 15 or top 10, he's a very good striker, and he definitely was getting. I definitely say that Chunyan was Berggzat was getting dominated, but he was giving Alexandre Topuria trouble with those calf kicks. That jab and that straight was looking very good throughout that night, and he had some good moments throughout that fight. He just couldn't handle the boxing for those whole 3 rounds. He did, but he just couldn't figure out how to get out of there. And Berggzat, has a very good chin. And honestly, man, this is where it's gonna be interesting because this is probably gonna be one of the best unranked bantamweight fights that we're gonna have all year. I think the UFC definitely knows what they're doing because throughout times of John Matsumoto, we've seen him have trouble on the feet. Definitely throughout that fight with Rafa, he was definitely having trouble, especially with that 1-2. And Berggzat has a very good 1-2. He knows how to sweep and move, cover that with a calf kick. But I feel like Berggzat should be throwing the calf kicks more coming into this fight, especially against a very explosive guy like John Matsumoto. But John Nascimento is very explosive too, where I could definitely see that giving Berggzat trouble throughout this fight. Berggzat definitely has a clean uppercut where he could catch him off guard. And neither of these fighters have ever been knocked out in their career, and I can definitely see somebody getting knocked out in this fight. But I'm gonna side here. I'm gonna pick John Matsumoto to win a split decision. I don't think he's gonna win far off. I think he's gonna have trouble on the feet throughout this fight. On the ground, on the ground with the grappling, maybe he can definitely have some success throughout that fight. But overall, this fight is just close everywhere. I could definitely see him clipping him a few times. I could definitely see John Nascimento's, absolutely getting beaten on because Berggzat is very good. And for the competition that he's had, Alexandre Topuria and Umar Magomedov, you would think that he would, you would think that, he didn't do that good of a job. But, against Alexandre Topuria, like I said, did decent. But against Umar Magomedov, that was a very good performance against him. But I'm going with John Matsumoto to win this one by a split decision. Next up, in the welterweight division, Daniil Donchenko versus Theodor Berggren. Now, give me Donchenko to win a first-round knockout. Theodor, I haven't seen really much of him. All I know is that he's a very good striker, decent, grappler, can be easily submitted. And Donchenko, I know Donchenko hasn't got a submission win since 2024, which about 2 years ago. Even though 2 years ago is still a long time, but, not as long. I feel like the last time, we've seen him get submitted was like about a year ago, a year and 6 months ago. And I feel like against Justin Burlington and Donchenko kind of have a similar grappling pace. I think stylistically it's going to be a bad night all night for him. I think he's going to get easily knocked out by Daniil Donchenko. Give me Daniil Donchenko by knockout. Next up, in the featherweight division, Kaan Ofli versus Javier Reyes. Now, listen, Kaan Ofli could be getting fed to the wolves in this fight. Javier Reyes, outside of the original scene, he beat Caleb Massimino, lost to Chris Muscat, beat Lance Lawrence, then beat one of the contenders here against Justice Torres. Most recently beat Douglas Silva, DeAndre, which was a very good win. I predicted him to win this fight. Kaan Ofli, man, looking at his run in the UFC, beat outside of the UFC, outside of the UFC, beating Jared Berggren. Then got into the UFC, lost to Marin Santos and Mohamed Noivov, which those are two good losses. Then he made his bounce back by beating Ricardo Ramos, which is a huge win. Most recently beat Yiza. And I'm going to be very real with you guys. He did not win that fight. It was not a majority decision. Yiza got robbed coming into that fight with Kaan Ofli. Kaan Ofli was getting pieced up. He was getting tired throughout that entire fight. And Yiza definitely has some underrated striking. I can definitely see Kaan Ofli getting absolutely whooped coming into this fight with Javier Reyes. Because Javier Reyes, in my opinion, he has a lot of experience as well. Even though it's his first time in the UFC, but he has about more experience than Kaan Ofli. I definitely think on the ground, Kaan Ofli could definitely get in trouble. I think while he's trying to close the distance because he's the shorter fight in this fight. I think he's just gonna get clipped with a lot of shots throughout this fight because he's mainly Kaan Ofli's known for his grappling, and even throughout his fight with Marin Santos. Marin Santos was definitely giving him trouble on the feet as well. Definitely controlling the pace throughout the fight. And every time, he was getting clipped a lot in that fight. But Mohamed Noyev, on the other hand, was a different story. Because Mohamed Noyev and Kaan Ofli was just like a grappling match. It was just like a grappling match with some MMA moves the entire fight. Then man, when he fought Yiza, man, I thought he was gonna win that fight. Honestly, I did think he was going to win that fight. I thought he was gonna submit him, but he didn't look that good at all. He didn't have no good moments in that fight. He tried to land a lot of bunch of takedowns. It didn't work. And the fact is, the height difference is just the reach difference in this fight is crazy. A 66-inch reach for Kaan Ofli against Javier Reyes, who's a 73-inch reach. Yeah, I don't know necessarily if Kaan Ofli is going to win this fight. I think he gets clipped a lot, and I'm going to favor Javier Reyes to win this fight by knockout. If Kaan Ofli could definitely keep this fight on the ground, especially without getting clipped on the way, trying to shoot for takedowns, I could definitely see him having success on the ground. But on the feet, Kaan Ofli is a decent striker. But when he faces a very good, well-rounded striker, he definitely has a lot of problems, especially that they don't even grapple. He has true problems with people who just strike and they're not even grapplers like that. He has trouble landing takedowns when he fights them, and that's just where I kind of see that's where it's just a little bit concerning because how are you struggling to land takedowns against somebody who doesn't even know how to grapple like that? It's just very concerning, and against a guy like Javier Reyes, where I just think it's gonna be an easy night. I think he's gonna jab. I think he's gonna use that jab, and I think he's going to easily stuff the takedowns, and possibly win a second round ground and pound decision. But if I feel like Kaan Ofli would definitely have to get a early submission like how he did it against Ricardo Ramos. That was actually very smart of him. Cause I feel like I picked him to win this fight, but even then, if he wasn't, to get that submission early against Ricardo Ramos, he probably would have lost that fight. So he's got to be, like how he did in that Ricardo Ramos fight, set that up. Think that that Ricardo he was gonna strike with Ricardo Ramos, and then go for that, and then land takedowns, go for that submission. That's what Kaan Ofli just has to do coming into this fight with Javier Reyes. If he can't do that, it's gonna be a bad night for him all night. At least where he's at. But yeah, give me Javier Reyes to win this fight by knockout. Next up here is Ruziboev versus Andrey Pulyaev. Now, this is a closer fight than what some of you guys may actually think. If we look at Andrey Pulyaev last 5 fights, beating Oliveira, beating Liam Anderson, getting to the UFC, losing to Christian Duncan. He looked very bad coming into that fight. I get it. But that's Christian Duncan, man. Christian Duncan is one of the best prospects in the middleweight division, beating Nick Kaan, which wasn't the best win, but looked very good. And then look in his last fight against Arturo Garcia, and we just seen Arturo Garcia knock out Ozzy Diaz, man. And he looked good in that fight. I feel like he could have possibly won. It was a pretty close fight, but definitely there were a few times where he did get clipped throughout that fight. But just knowing how Arturo Garcia is. He's not the type of guy to go for an early, a knockout like that. He kind of just waits for the right moment. But there was a few times where he could have got knocked out. But Pulyaev definitely played that game very smart. He was using, using his reach advantage. Definitely using fight. The reason how he went the distance is not because Arturo Garcia was being hesitant. He was using fight IQ, moving around, trying to control the range, kind of, and that's what you need to do when coming into a fight, when you're fighting a guy like Arturo Garcia. If you can't do it, that's what most people kind of don't do when they fight Arturo Garcia. They're like, oh man, stay hard, man. We can stand and bang with this guy. If you legit see majority of this man's fights in the UFC, majority of them just either stand and bang or they don't really move their head like that. He was moving, using footwork, controlling the distance. And it was kind of, in those early rounds, it was kind of hard for Pulyaev to get hit by Garcia because how good he was looking with the footwork. But definitely towards like that third round, he was kind of starting to get kind of tired, and I think that's what made him lose that fight. And against a guy like Nursulton, Ruziboev, who, getting into the UFC, beating Bruno Ferreira, taking his own way, that was an impressive win. Beating, Cedricus Dumas, which isn't the best win. Losing to Joaquin Buckley, which, I get Joaquin Buckley isn't looking as good as right now, but, that's still a good loss, though, honestly. And then, beating Eric Makano, knocking him out, that was very impressive. Most recently, beating Dustin Scalvez. Listen, the problem I have here with Nursulton is that he's not that active. He fights like once a blue moon, like two times early in the year, like early in the year, and then he kind of just vanishes. We don't know what is happening. He's not fighting, and coming into a fight, coming in and fighting a guy like Andrey Pulyaev, who is the taller fighter, has the better fight IQ, and has such good footwork. I don't know if Ruziboev is going to necessarily hit him a lot. I get it that, Ruziboev is the favorite for this fight. I feel like some of you guys may be counting out Pulyaev. Pulyaev has such underrated fight IQ that, I get it when he first came into the UFC, it looked like he wasn't using it. But then once he wasn't afraid to get hit no more, that's when he started using the footwork. He has good fight IQ, guys. He has a good jab, and I think this could definitely be a bad night for Ruziboev if he can't close the distance. If it stays on the outside, Ruziboev can definitely win. I do think what Pulyaev does struggle is when he's on the inside. On the outside, he's very good. But, on the inside, he tends to struggle a little bit. And he was struggling against Arturo Garcia. Definitely struggling a lot against Christian Lloyd Duncan. They kind of struggle in this fight with Nick Clanton. Even fights outside of the UFC. Even his fight with Liam Anderson in the Contender Series. He struggled a lot on the inside. But if he can definitely keep this fight at range, which I think he could possibly do, I think it's going to be an easy night for him. But if he can't, then it may either be a close fight or he can definitely get dominated. That's where, this fight comes to, is very interesting in. But now, who do I got winning this fight? I'm going to be very real with you guys. I'm going with Andrey Pulyaev. I'm going with the underdog here. And I got valid reasons, man. He moves his head very well. And he was kind of, he's kind of hard to hit when he's moving his head. When he's kind of afraid, he's very easily to be hit. But, when he's moving around, keeping it at range, he's very hard to hit, especially in those early rounds. I can definitely see that third round where Ruziboev starts to piece him up. Maybe like a third round knockout, maybe for Ruziboev. But definitely those early rounds, Pulyaev definitely tired. Definitely not that tired. I feel like Pulyaev, if he wants to consistently keep moving like that, which, he has before, he tends to get tired a lot. I feel like that's what he needs better of a lot coming into these fights. But I'm going with Pulyaev to win a decision. I think Ruziboev is gonna get frustrated. He could definitely get knocked out if he gets so frustrated and messes around. But give me Pulyaev by decision. Next up In the light heavyweight division, we got up here Abdul Yakhyaev versus Julius Walker. Now, stylistically, I don't know how I feel about this match for Julius Walker. Julius Walker, outside of the UFC, he was looking pretty good. He was looking like a prospect, beating Bevan Lewis, beating Marin Dennis, where it got him into UFC. Lost to Alonzo Menfield, which honestly that was a banger of a fight. And we just see Alonzo Menfield destroy and knock out Jamie Young and pulling up one of the biggest upsets of the year. Then beating Rafael Fiziev, then most recently getting absolutely destroyed by Jacoby Smith. No, Dustin Jacoby, which, I'm going to be very real with you guys. That was a late stoppage, man. Honestly, I kind of felt bad for Julius Walker in that fight because I feel like that fight needed to be stopped a little bit earlier. I feel like that was stopped a little bit too late. And but Abdul Rakhman has looking like a very high prospect outside of the UFC, beating Paulin, Bijar, beating Jackie, Jenny, beating Alec Lorenzo in Dana White's contender series, getting into the UFC, beating Rafael Fiziev as well. Most recently beating Brenson Ribeiro, which I get that's not. I can kind of say that's a big win for Abdul, especially that Brenson Ribeiro has fought some at league competition, but Brenson Ribeiro in general is just really not that. Is really not that good when it comes to when he gets good competition like this. Listen, man, I feel like the UFC nowadays they have these big prospects, but they kind of just start out by giving them cans. Back then they were, like when the UFC had prospects back then, let's take a look back when Doo Choi was a prospect. When Doo Choi was a prospect, they weren't putting him against cans. They were kind of putting him against fighters on his level, and then they gave him then they were like, okay, we're gonna give him Cub Watson. That's what the UFC needs to start doing more often. And even when O'Malley was a prospect, they were giving him fighters on his level. Then they're like, okay, let's give him to Peter Yan. That's what I feel like the UFC doesn't do nowadays. That I feel like the UFC needs to do more of. Because on the ground, Julius Walker does not have a very good ground game at all, and I think that's where he kind of tends to struggle. And I think Abdul Rakhman is going to submit him in the first round. Listen, I'm not gonna fully count out Julius Walker because we've already seen millions of upsets this year. Last week, Kevin Burrows beating Andre Lima. So yeah, I'm not going to entirely count this man out, especially that a lot of fighters who were undefeated have just started losing their O. I'm not necessarily counting him out in this fight, but I just think that on the ground he does not have a good ground game. On the feet, he could definitely give him some trouble, but I do think that he's coming back a little bit too soon. I do feel like he should be coming back. He should be fighting later this year, maybe November. Just how bad that fight was when he fought Dustin Jacoby. But I'm going with Abdul Rakham Yakhyaev. I think on the ground he's definitely gonna give him trouble. I think Julius Walker won't be able to defend the takedowns. I think Abdul is gonna be a little bit too strong for Julius Walker. Give me Abdul by submission. Next up, featured prelim. Farman Hasanov versus Eric Nolan. Now, I don't know. Listen, Farman, and I'm going to be very real with you guys. I don't know what I've seen right here, but apparently he's undefeated, but he has a loss, which just kind of concerns me a little bit. But apparently that's an amateur matchup, which I don't get how that's I just don't get how that's on MMA record. So they don't have there wasn't really that much footage from Farman. I did see his one fight against Luke Roberts. That was all I really legit could find. So for what I've seen from Farman Hasanov is that he definitely has a decent striking base, a good grappling base, but I don't get how he's the favorite to beat Eric Nolan. I think the only reason why this man is truly a fan the under not the underdog for the fight and the favorite to win this fight is that he's undefeated. That's legit all my guesses are. But like Eric Nolan, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC today. You know, I get he lost to Bansur Cernicata, you know, Bansur. But you know, you guys don't remember he dropped Bansugor in that fight in that first round. This man was nearly close of finishing him. And I've seen his other fights outside of the UFC. You know, beating Bland Richards, beating Trevor Gride, beating Aaron Charvis, beating Rafael Cameron. So he has good leg kicks. He has a good striking base. And I think against a guy like Farman, I think Eric Nolan wins a first round knockout here, guys. Listen, Farman, like I said, I haven't seen too much footage of him, so I can't really say that this is going to be an obvious fight. But you know, from what I've seen from his fight with Luke Roberts, I think you know he was struggling with on the feet in general. I think he's going to struggle again, and I think it's a good idea that Eric Nolan's moving down to welterweight just because you know he's too small, in my opinion. For what I saw, he's too small for middleweight. Let's just be real, guys. He's not that big of a guy for middleweight. But you know, back to the fight, I think you know his boxing and his kicks are two things that come very good in handy. I think he gets a first or second round knockout. I'm calling the first for Eric Nolan. I don't see Farm really winning this fight. You know, he definitely has a decent chin, but you know, I don't think he's going to do against on Eric Nolan's level. Give me Eric Nolan by knockout. Next up, we move up here to the main cards. Abus Magomedov versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Now, this fight is 50-50. And I've been going back and forth on who I'm going to pick for this fight. Because Michal Oleksiejczuk, we look at his last 5 fights. You know, he did lose to Kevin Holland in a which was a kind of a boring fight. Let's be very real. Then lost to Sharm Magomedov, which was a very good fight where he could have possibly a very good fight. Then, you know, went on the street fight winning streak, beating Shadrikas Dumas, which wasn't, you know, the best win. But then, you know, taking that win and beating Gerald Mercerat. Most recently having a very close fight, a very good fight against Marc-Andre Barlett. Now, I feel like ever since, you know, Michal, you know, went to the Fighting Nerds, he's been looking very good ever since. His last 3 performances been looking very good. And then we look at Abus Magomedov. Abus Magomedov lost to Kyle Bahia, which, you know, Kyle Bahio's in Michal Oleksiejczuk's corner. You know, then, you know, he beat Wilder Alves, beating Bruno Ferreira, which, you know, that was kind of surprising. But yet again, you know, Bruno Ferreira was kind of throwing the same punch over and over again. Then, you know, beat Michel Pereira, which I don't even know how the heck he did that. His 2 wins over Bruno Ferreira and Michel Pereira, I don't even know how the heck he did that. Then, you know, lost to Joe Pyfer. But, you know, he didn't do bad in that fight at all. You know, if we just look back at the fight, that first round, he was beating the absolute crap out of Joe Pyfer. But what happened was he used all of his energy on that one round. That in that second round, when he went back to his corner, he was just gassed. Like he had no energy in the tank. He used that all up just to try and knock Joe Pyfer out in that first round. And yeah, that didn't go so well at all. But yeah, but we can't take, you know, just because he got submitted by Joe Pyfer, and I get Joe Pyfer's one of the best middleweights in the world right now. He did good in that first round, but you know that's my concern because you know Abus Magomedov definitely isn't the the greatest striker, but you know he has this weird style. You know this he's not really. If you just look at Abus Magomedov, he's really not that skilled of a fighter. But he uses his abilities to use. Sometimes you see fighters who aren't really that skillful and they still manage to make it work. And Abus Magomedov is also a former top 15 middleweight in the world. Middleweight. Well, middleweight. He's not one of the top middleweights right now. But you know he was in the top 15 at first, and all he really lost, if we look at his resume, all he really lost to is good fighters. Like, we look at this man's resume in general, you know, he lost to Sean Strickland, which, you know, Sean Strickland, current champ, Kyle Ohio, top fighter, Joe Pyfer, top fighter. This man has only lost to the best in the world. So we can't really necessarily take that away. He's had some good moments. He's had some good moments with these fighters. With Sean Strickland for sure. I could definitely say that he didn't really, he had a decent good moments. It was a pretty good fight between him and Sean Strickland, but I feel like he tends to kind of gas out throughout fights a little bit. And and possibly his entire career, his cardio has definitely been a problem. Michal Oleksiejczuk, one thing I could say that definitely has been a problem is definitely handling a good grappler like Kevin Holland, for an example. He struggled with Kevin Holland, and you guys may say Kevin Holland is not a good grappler. He is. But at the same time, he isn't, because sometimes he makes fun of it, and sometimes he looks horrible on the feet, on the ground. But then sometimes he just looks very good on the ground, like what he did against Vicente Luque. But now, who do I got winning this fight? Abus Magomedov or Michal Oleksiejczuk? I get why Abus Magomedov's the favorite, but I'm going with Michal Oleksiejczuk. I think his striking is a little more accurate, and I think it's going to be a back-to-back fight. And I know Abu Magomedov's definitely the taller fighter coming into this fight, but I don't see him controlling the distance this entire fight. I can see this being a very big problem. It's going to be a back-to-back fight. This could be fight of the night for sure. But I just think Abu Smagidov towards those later rounds, he's gonna start gassing out, and I think that's when Michal Oleksiejczuk, man, he gotta take his time throughout fights, and he looks better and better throughout the rounds, and I think it's just gonna be it could be a bad night for Abu Smagidov, but I'm going with Michal Oleksiejczuk to win a unanimous decision, a competitive unanimous decision for Michal Oleksiejczuk. But like I said, if Abu Smagidov, I think on the ground he could definitely give him some trouble if it goes to the ground. But on the feet, it's definitely going to be a back-to-back brawl. But I definitely could see, Abus giving him trouble because, with that awkward striking that he has. But I just think Michal Oleksiejczuk is going to win. Give me Michal Oleksiejczuk by unanimous decision. Next up, in the middle, we stay in the middleweight division. Bruno Ferreira versus Ikram Almakhan. Now, listen. Ikram's only two losses are to Hamza Chimaev outside of the UFC and to Robert Whitaker. So his two losses aren't bad at all. But looking at his last five fights, he beat Phil House. Then, went in and beat Warley Owls. They lost to Robert Whitaker on short notice. Then went in and beat Andre Muniz. Andre Muniz come from the UFC. And, beat Young Park, which I think Park's come from the UFC too. If not, he's if not, he's dealing with injuries right now. But as for Bruno Ferreira, went in and lost to Abu Smagidov. Then, went in and beat Armin Basharian. Then beat Jackson McVeigh, and which was a decent win. Had his biggest win of his career, beating Marvin Vettori. Then, lost to Gregory Rodriguez, where I picked him to lose this fight. Now, that was like 40 months ago. And definitely it's quite interesting because I do think that, I feel like Bruno Ferreira could be coming back a little bit too soon because that knockout with Gregory Rodriguez, man. Let me just tell you, man, after he got knocked out by him, listen, he started, he legit, that was legit, the most viral thing going on in the UFC right at that time. But I definitely could see this being a problem because we look back at his fight with Marvin Vettori. Throughout that fight, he kind of quite struggled to knock out Marvin Vettori throughout the fight. Marvin Vettori was quite moving throughout those early rounds. Marvin Vettori could have possibly won that fight. But Ikram is a different level because Ikram has a solid chin. He's been clipped quite a few times. But on the inside, on the outside, Bruno Ferreira seems to struggle a lot. He's not that tall of a guy, so he kind of gets frustrated. He kind of rushes in, and that's what leads him to possibly getting knocked out. And sometimes he tries to spam the same moves like he did in that fight with Abu Smagomedov. He was spamming the same move over and over again, and eventually it just wasn't working. And he was caught off guard by by Robocob, and he got knocked out. But Ikram, man, I feel like Ikram kind of struggles with fighters who pressure a lot throughout fights. Even his fight with Park had a few good moments where he was, having Ikram struggle throughout fights. But on the feet, Ikram's a decent striker, a decent grappler. He's a decent fighter everywhere. And I'm kind of surprised that Bruno Ferreira isn't a favorite for this fight, but I also know why. Because, Bruno Ferreira did take a lot of damage in that fight with Robocop. And I think he could definitely have the same thing here. But I'm going to side with Bruno Ferreira. I think he wins a second round knockout. Now, listen, it's possible that Ikram could win. I just think, he's tend to struggle with pressured fighters who hit very hard. And Bruno Ferreira definitely hits hard, and he definitely packs a huge punch. And, he's already been knocked out by Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker does hit hard, but Bruno Ferreira just, it's kind of, he kind of moves forward, pressures a lot. I think, the pressure is going to be a little too much. I think Ikram gets overwhelmed, and I think, he starts trying to, he probably may get afraid to be getting hit by a guy like Bruno Ferreira. I think Bruno Ferreira is going to, I think it's going to be a struggle for Ikram all night in this fight. Give me Bruno Ferreira to win this fight by knockout in the second round. But if Ikram can definitely control the distance, keep him with those, those front kicks that definitely keep shorter fighters at range, it definitely would be an easy night for Ikram as well. But I just think he's going to get pressured by the Hulk in this fight. Give me Bruno Ferreira to win this one by knockout. Now, in the flyweight division, we have up here Ashu Alabavi versus Charles Johnson. Now, listen, y'all. I think this could be a little bit of a big step up in competition for Charles Johnson. It could be, it could not be. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. Looking at his last 5 fights, beating Sumar Darje, which, Sumar Darje is definitely one of the best prospects right now. And I get it, Sumar Darje, had a no contest with Alex Perez. Before that, he was definitely beating the crap out of him for sure. Then, lost to Razem Temirov, beat Lonnie Kavanagh, which was a very good win. Lonnie, and that's the only guy to beat Lonnie or Kavanagh. Then, lost to Alex Perez, and then most recently, beat Bruno Silva in a split decision, where I thought he kind of lost his fight against Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva definitely, just lost his last fight against Edgar Sarches. But if we look at Ashu Albavi, going into the UFC, he beat Jose Johnson, beat Matuiz, Nicole, losing him in No Cop, which, No Cop just knocked out Kyoichi Horiguchi the other day. Then, beat Jose Ochoa and Alex, he beat Alex Perez. But, that's the problem I have in that fight. Because in that fight with, Alex Perez, he was getting beat on the entire time. But then, he just got a submission in that third round where, it caused Alex Perez to tap out and the fight stopped. So I could definitely see Charles Johnson definitely pressuring him throughout this fight. But I feel like Charles Johnson definitely seems to struggle with heavy wrestlers, and he's not the best grappler in this division at all. He doesn't have very good takedown defense, and surprisingly, he's the older fighter in this fight, and I feel like he's 36 years old. He's getting older and older, and his last 2 performances, his last 2 fights, 1-1, and his last fight against Bruno Silva wasn't necessarily the best. I could definitely see this being a very good fight, but Ashu Albavi has very good grappling that I don't think, maybe Charles Johnson towards those early rounds could definitely give Ashu Albavi trouble on the feet, but I think eventually he'll start to get tired, possibly start to get tired to those later rounds. I think it's going to be a very big struggle for Charles Johnson throughout the fight. Charles Johnson obviously is very fast. If he can get Ashu Albavi out early, then that's definitely very impressive. Because we definitely seen Ashu Albavi struggle with fast fighters who have good striking on the feet before, like Manuel Cop. Even when he fought Jose Ochoa throughout that fight, the boxing was kind of getting to him a little bit. We just seen Jose Ochoa beat Clayton Carpenter at UFC 329. So, that's a solid win. But yet again, Jose Ochoa did take that fight on short notice. But now, who do I got winning this fight? It's kind of tough to say, but I'm going to go with Ashu Albavi to win a decision. I think Ashu Albavi's grappling is going to be a little too much with him. I think, he'll definitely mix it with some clinch knees, some clinch elbows. And I feel like that's where he mainly does the best work with the striking base. I think it could be a bad night for Charles Johnson. I'm saying a pretty close split decision for Ashul Bavi to beat Charles Johnson. But if Charles Johnson, like I said, I feel like Charles Johnson would have to get out, would have to get Ashul Bavi out early if he wants any success on winning this fight. Give me Charles Johnson by give me Ashul Bavi by decision. Next up, the featured bout on the main card before the co-main event: Nazim Sanikov versus Matuis Camilio. Now, this is an interesting fight because Matuis Camilio, on the original scene, he beat Darren Ramos, beat Donchenko Sajo, beat Nabazov, then got into UFC, lost to Gabe Green, which isn't the best look because Gabe Green is really not that good of a fighter, and I'm surprised he really got submitted by him. Then, beat Urkaslav Borkachev, which, is a decent win, which, was a fight where, he should have won, obviously. And then, Nazim, went in and beat Terrence McKinney by submission. We just seen Terrence McKinney knock out Kyle Nelson, lost to Yargashev, Borkachev by a draw. Then, beat Ismail Bonfi, which was a good win. Very impressive. He destroyed him. Then, went in and beat Nicolas Mato, which was a very good fight. Then, most recently lost to Farzim, which was a very bad stoppage. Like, I don't know what Jason Herzog was thinking, but if you guys really look back at that fight. Alright, y'all. So right here. I'm gonna play the clip. If you guys
big right hand. Oh, we heard. You may not get to round
exactly.
3. There's the horn.
Right after, see, y'all see that, right? Legit right after that. Look.
Called the fight, Sanikov. He's getting better.
The referee stopped that right after the bell. So if you guys don't believe me, I just showed y'all proof. The referee stopped that after the bell. You can't stop a fight after the bell without a doctor stoppage. The only time you can stop a fight after the bell is if the doctors say that they can't continue, or the corner says it. A ref can't stop a fight after the bell. So that was definitely a very early stoppage. Nazim could have continued, man. I just don't know what Jason Herzog was thinking when it came to that. But it's whatever. It was what's done is done. But against a guy like Matuis Camilio kind of moves. I feel like Matuis Camilio kind of does get clipped pretty easily. It's kind of easy to take down because his stance. He just walks forward like this, and sometimes you could defend yourself like that. But when you're landing takedowns, you're kind of you kind of can't land takedowns when you're in a stance like that. That's where this kind of struggles for me in a fight with a guy like Nazim who moves around pretty fast, very explosive on the feet. Definitely has very good kicks. It's gonna be a pretty fun fight, but I think he definitely could destroy Camilio in this fight. And I could if Gabe Green can submit Matuis Camilio, I think so can Nazim Sanikov. I think Nazim Sanikov has good wrestling, definitely good good striking on the feet, and I think that Nazim wins a first round knockout over Matuis Camilio. Matuis Camilio, I think, is going to be a bad night, a bad night all day for him. I think he easily gets knocked out. It's good, and I don't think he's gonna have the chin to destroy, to knock out Nazim. Give me Nazim by knockout. Next up, the co-main event: Michal Pereira versus Shara Bullets. Now, this is honestly an interesting fight because if you look at Shara Bullet's last 5 fights, he beat Antonio Trockley, which that's not the greatest win, but then beat Michal Oleksiejczuk in a close fight. That's a big win. Then went in and beat Armin Pasharian in a very good clean knockout. Lost to MVP, which had struggled a lot in that fight. Beat Marc-Andre Barlett. Listen, man, I like Shara Bullet, but he doesn't fight that much often. We can't say it's his fault, man. He could only fight in certain places. He can't fight in America because he has one eye. But if you look at Michal Pereira beat Anar Patara, lost to Anthony Hernandez, lost to Abu Smagmadov. Listen, These two losses right here to Kylodakis and Abusmagana were quite concerning. Especially that we just seen, Kylodakis got absolutely pieced up by Bo Nickel. Losing to Anthony Hernandez, I can say losing to Anthony Hernandez isn't bad, even though Anthony Hernandez lost to Sean Strickland previously. But that's not a bad loss at all. Made his bounce back by beating Zach Reese, which this was a fight where, I kind of thought he lost. But yet again, it was a very close fight, and I thought, I'm surprised he didn't get Fight of the Night award. It was no Fight of the Night on that card. But, yet again, Zach Reese did play that fight dirty. I think he eye poked him a few times. He definitely load blowed him a few times. Where I don't know how the heck Michel Pereira was even, could even survive that because he was getting hit consistently. Man, Zach Reese was just trying to get him out of there. But definitely, Michel Pereira is not the same fighter that he once was. And against a guy like Charbullet, I definitely think this is going to be a back-to-back war. Charbullet is a very good Muay Thai fighter, decent grappler. Michel Pereira on the feet is a very explosive guy. Definitely, does throw these awkward type moves a little bit. I definitely think they're kind of he kind of does throw some kind of stupid moves throughout this fight. But Michel Pereira, man, when this man first got into the UFC, he was this insane entertainer. But then, I feel like what happened was he kind of took a little bit too much damage, man. When you fight, that type of style doesn't, and also that type of style, man, doesn't last that long at all. It really doesn't, man. The style that he had, he was kind of this, kind of like the Superman type style, kind of. It was very explosive. He got on that 3-fight winning streak, and especially those two losses that he had over Kylodakis and Abusmagana. Especially that Kylodakis did think they fight on short notice. Abusmagana, man, I feel like Abusmagana is a good fighter. Kind of surprised on how he lost that fight. I feel like he was going to easily chin Abusmagana, but at this point, he's kind of not the same fighter no more. I could definitely see in this be a pretty good fight. But I definitely think, I feel like it's gonna be a one side. I think because I'm going to favor Charbullet to win this fight by a decision, for sure. Definitely, I feel like Michel Pereira will definitely have a few good moments throughout this fight. He'll definitely rock Charbullet because Charbullet has been rocked a few times before. But I don't necessarily see him winning this fight. All I really see is him really winning a pretty close fight. Him winning a flashy knockout against Charbullet. If he can't get a flashy KO against Charbullet, then he may just have loads of trouble in this fight. He just may have a lot of trouble in this fight with Charbullet. I think Charbullet easily wins this one. I think the Muay Thai, I think the striking in general is going to be a little bit too much. It's going to be a little bit too much, for Michel Pereira. I think it could be a bad night for Michel Pereira. But give me Charbullet to win this one by decision. Next up, we have up here our main event. Rafael Fiziev versus Manuel Torres. Now, looking at their last 5 fights, he beat, we got Manuel Torres, who beat Nicole Mata, then, beat Chris Duncan, which was a good win. He beat Chris Duncan in his own game, which that was very impressive. Right after that, I lost to Ignacio Bahamondes, came back pretty strong, beating Drew Doper, most recently beating Grant Dawson, which I did predicted Manuel Torres to lose this fight with Grant Dawson. But if you look at Fiziev's last 5 fights, losing to Justin Gaethje, who's the current champion, losing to Matias Gamrot on a leg injury, lost to Justin Gaethje again, which, I predicted him to lose this fight again, losing to Bahamondes, which, I predicted him to win this fight, and I predicted him to beat Mauricio Ruf. Yeah, I did. I thought, the Muay Thai was going to be a little too much. I thought, he was going to mix it up with some takedown of defense. But, I get it, Rafael Fiziev is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. But I get why he's, slightly a favor. But this fight is a 50-50 fight. And I feel like some of you guys are kind of sleeping on Rafael Fiziev because Manuel Torres definitely struggles with very fast fighters. We saw that in his fight with Bahamut. We saw that in this fight with Bahamondes, he struggles with that a little bit. But when he faces guys who don't move on the feet like that, he kind of tends to see, to win that fight. And Rafael Fiziev has underrated boxing, man. He has very good kicks that I think that he could definitely catch Torres off guard. Listen, his last win was against Bahamondes, and he looked very good in that fight against Bahamondes. He had a lot of good success in that fight. Even though I get that was almost a year ago. It's going to be about a year. It's going to be about a year ago. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he still can't beat Rafa, Manuel Torres, because Manuel Torres, like I said, tends to struggle with fighters heavily who move around a lot on the feet. I think he's going to. I think he could possibly struggle with that. Manuel Torres definitely has very good underrated knockout power. But just like on the, I feel like Fiziev could definitely, if he's smart enough, he could definitely move around a lot on the feet for sure. He could definitely mix in some takedowns if he has the right fight IQ for this fight. But if Fiziev gets knocked out very early in this fight, I would definitely think that he should retire. And I do think Fiziev has definitely took a lot of punches to the head, because even in that fight with Mauricio Ruffy, he did take a lot of punches to the head, and that was definitely one of the best fights of the year so far, though. So far of the year, there's still plenty more to come. I just think that was definitely a very good fight, especially for 2 rounds straight. But, I feel like, Manuel Torres is just different from losing to Mauricio Rufi, losing to Justin Gaethje twice, even Matthias Gamrot. Those are all, it's different ball games. I feel like, Fiziev had the better competition. I think those kicks could definitely be a lot for Torres. He could definitely move around the octagon a lot. And I'm a favorite Rafael Fiziev to win a knockout. I'm going knockout towards that 3rd round. I'm predicting the 3rd round in this fight, guys. Like I said, I feel like, Fiziev could definitely use that crisp boxing that he has. Definitely, for sure use those kicks that he has that are very sharp, clean. I think he could definitely dodge a lot of punches from Manuel Torres. I think if he could survive the early fights, the early rounds, he could definitely have a lot of success towards the later rounds. Especially that Manuel Torres has not been in a 5-round fight before. I think Rafael Fiziev gets a 3rd round knockout here. But that will be the end of the video, y'all. If you guys enjoy my type of UFC content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on notifications when you guys want to see when I upload more videos. I'll see you on the next one, man. Thank y'all for 113 subscribers, man. I appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace.